You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel,
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
and we're your hosts for this show. And of course, it's not really a lot going on in the Star Wars universe, at least that I know of as far as news goes. I mean, of course, we still have The Mandalorian and Grogu in theaters, and it's unfortunately it's continuing its slide down. Even though, again, I mean, it was a good movie, it was fine. It pretty much did what it needed to do, but it started out strong, but I mean, if you want to read all about it, Grandmaster's got a bunch of stuff about it in the Discord, and a bunch of explanations too. But tonight we're going to switch gears a little bit, and now in light of all this, because remember last week we talked about Starfighter and what was going on with that, and then of course maybe the disappointing box office of Mandalorian and Grogu and how that's affecting things. So now we're going to switch and we're going to talk about how important Ahsoka Season 2 is now to this franchise and just seeing like where it's going from here. Because one of our viewers in the Discord basically chatted and said that, it's pretty important, but I had made the comment that, he actually was talking about how they paid 4.2 million or something to buy Lucasfilm, and they made something like 12 billion off the franchise so far. So I mean, it's not like it's really failing in that sense. However, the legacy has definitely been tarnished, and now it's not printing money. Had they handled this thing right, this thing could have been printing money until the end of time, but they didn't. And so what's happening now is that you're starting to see the effect. It's because it's going to take a while. I mean, yeah, when everybody was decrying that Star Wars is over, but yet they would release a movie and it would make a couple $1 billion, everybody's like, well, I don't know, but it's like anything else. I mean, you look at the Titanic. The Titanic hit the iceberg. It wasn't like it went under right away. It was a gradual. I mean, it was still pretty fast. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, it was a gradual thing. So after the damage was done, even though it was a pretty fatal thing, you didn't feel that right away. Everything felt relatively normal. And that's sort of how the Star Wars franchise has been, is that things felt, for a while anyway, relatively normal. But I think now we're starting to see the effects of what damage has been done to this franchise. And so this puts us at Ahsoka Season 2, coming out next year. I think May. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
All right. So already we got some chats. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to get these things going because again, this stuff is driven by you guys, so obviously we'll give our opinions about everything along the way, but hey, let's see what you guys have to say right out the gate. So Ted, of course, opens us up. He says, hey guys, Season 2 needs every episode to be as good and impactful as Season 1, Episode 5 was. It needs to be wide open and deep lore from the first scene to the last. And, I mean, I would agree that the problem they had was that Ahsoka Season 1 did suffer from some issues. I mean, you guys can go back and watch our actual reviews, like when we had just freshly seen the episodes. But it was enjoyable, it was fun, and we overall liked it. But it had some major issues, and that cannot happen for Season 2. I would say that even though both of us enjoyed it, I think that ultimately it probably let us down from what the trailers were. You would probably agree with that, I would assume.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that there are some things that need to happen this season. Okay, so Dragonfly chimes in and says, "All good." He's talking to Ted basically. I agree, season is being hyped. Big starship battle on the back end of the season, they say. All right. Iron Boy Wonder joins us. Says, "Evening. excellent. No, film was never successful. Felt no hype. Yeah, I agree. It's the problem with the Mandalorian and Grogu actually was the fact that I think again they hyped it in one respect, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of devolved a little bit. Even though, again, a lot of it didn't bother me personally, but I do understand the criticism. Let's see. What else we got? Goes feel after lame Boba Fett series or Forgotten Mando season 3, people have lost their trust in Filoni. I think that's starting to happen. Uh, Character have a lot of fixation, obsession, Padme Amidala after hearing cutscene Obi-Wan. Yeah, well, so that's another interesting thing too. There were long time rumors that Natalie Portman was going to return to the franchise. However, yes, there was supposed to be some sort of scene that ultimately supposed to be cut, I guess, from the Obi-Wan series, but it never really, I don't even think it was actually done. If Grandmaster were on here, he could probably tell us, but I'm not sure about that. He says, feel Portman coming back for Ahsoka season 2. Should use the Clone Wars costume. I'd be down with that.
If
And
it's the white pants outfit,
yeah, if it's that one, there were a couple of one. Feel the actress would understand the Clone Wars. And then Dave Filoni, not saying season 2, one. Did he say that's a good? Did he say that Ahsoka season 2 is the final one?
That I haven't heard.
Yeah, well, I'd be curious about that because now I know that Filoni, well, not Filoni, but uh, Tony Gilroy. Remember, um, like Andor. Andor was originally supposed to run for 5 seasons, and then it ended up just coming down to the two. And that
Hmm.
was a decision that they decided to just streamline the storyline and just make it a little bit tighter. As far as Ahsoka goes, I don't know. I'm sure, of course, if Grandmaster doesn't end up watching this live, he might be. He doesn't always chat. Sometimes he actually does watch us live, but he doesn't necessarily chat unless there's a bunch of questions he feels he's chiming on. Other times, like last week, he's pretty involved during the whole show. But regardless, he will watch this again, and he will answer a lot of the stuff that's being brought up in the Discord, I'm sure. So some of the stuff I'm sure he'll address like that. Who knows? I mean, I personally don't know if they should go beyond a season 2 in this one. Just because I'm not sure, but again, this is all speculation given we don't even know it really. We kind of know the somewhat of the framework, but we don't really know, right?
Hmm. Well, here's been my biggest again. Here's why I kind of selected this as a topic for tonight. Um, with Star Wars, it has its own identity, right? We've talked about this before, and the problem that I am seeing is that although when it kind of separates from its identity in the sense of like people say like, oh, I want to see different stuff besides the Jedi and Sith. I want to see Mesa War. I want to see space battles. I want to see Saving Private Ryan or Top Gun in space or something like that. And don't get me wrong, I think those are all cool and great things. But we can't lose the identity of what Star Wars is, and it's the lore. And the problem that Star Wars has severely had is that no one has been able to craft characters and stories like George Lucas. That's the biggest problem. Because now, don't get me wrong, Dave Filoni has done a great job with Ahsoka, creating the character of Ahsoka. Love her. Annoying at first, but then we all admittedly grew to love her, right? Also created some other cool characters like Hera and Ezra. characters that are cool, but see, they were created in animation, and those stories were told in animation. The problem is that you have to be able to tell these stories of these characters in live action. And you have to be able to create, and in order for this franchise to survive and go back to the glory days that we once knew it to be, is that a compelling you have to have compelling characters. You have to have a Luke Skywalker. You got to have, who's the next Darth Vader? Who's the next Palpatine? Who are they?
Well,
Because
the problem is they keep bringing back Vader and Palpatine. It's
well,
like,
that's my whole point, is because you can't come up with anybody else.
but they
That's been my
have.
whole
The
problem. I
problem
mean,
is,
outside of Kylo Ren, which I think, like, you dropped the ball with him, because you could have really explored that whole situation while you still had Luke. God rest Carrie Fisher, but even though she's gone, you still could have done stuff with her character. Even so there's ways you could have maneuvered and told stories around, or like you said, even if you didn't kill him off, you have a Ben Solo that's on the good side now, and you can, like you always said, Eric, hey, okay, what's the ramifications of this? Like, okay, hey, I'm Ben Solo now. I'm no longer Kylo. I know I kind of, decimated a lot of you guys' planets and, killed a bunch of villagers and all this stuff, but, I promise you I'm good now. What does that look like to the New Republic? Those are things, but my problem is that, the reason why we love Maul Shadow Lord is because he's a compelling character. Again, it's another George Lucas creation. It's nothing that's come new. Nothing new really has really stood out to say, like, man, I want to dress up like this person for Halloween. Man, this person is so cool. I want to see more books. I want comics. I want all this stuff about, like, no one's clamoring for that. I don't even see people clamoring to be Ahsoka. I mean, as great of a character as she is, I mean,
yeah.
you don't really see a whole lot of kids wanting to become
Well,
Ahsoka.
I think at one point that started happening, because don't forget, Ahsoka was created while Lucas was still very. I mean, yes, it was Filoni's
True.
character, but Lucas was still very much driving the ship at that point. But I think that, for whatever reason, I think maybe, again, I think that it's diminished. I think the franchise is diminishing. It's still, they're still flying half a ship.
Hmm.
Like, you can still fly it, you can still navigate it even to a degree, but there's definitely some heavy damage to this thing. Okay, so we got more chats. And of course, Grandmaster is with us. Voyager is actually joining us. It's good to see her back with us. Always enjoy that. Dragonfly says, I thought it was all to lead into a Filoni movie, maybe Heir to the Empire. And yeah, I mean, that was discussed, right? That was like one of the original things that they had talked about. Now, the Heir to the Empire thing, that was floated out there. There were different reports, and it was somewhat between a little bit of a kernel of truth, and then, of course, there were some rumors, and then people, when they heard the whole Heir to the Empire thing, they immediately thought of the Expanded Universe Timothy Zahn novel. Really, what they should have done in the first place is just done his as episodes 7, 8, and 9, and then you could have just made movies out of all the Expanded Universe books, at least all the good ones, and you wouldn't have had a problem, because one, you had a built-in audience. All those books were on the bestseller list at one point. Everybody loved the Expanded Universe, and it would have actually opened up all the casual fans to it, and they wouldn't have had to do anything really, but everybody feels like they got to reinvent the wheel somehow. All right, so our Lucasfilm insider, Grandmaster, joins us, and he confirms that Natalie, in fact, did film scenes for Kenobi. They were cut. Natalie has not been contacted to return. I remember there was that. There was also talk that she was going to come back as another character, too. I don't remember who the character was off, but I do remember, I don't know how much validity there was to it, but I do remember something along those lines. And of course, Voyager chimes in and says, "What? What do you mean Natalie filmed scenes for Kenobi?" And she was like, "How do you know?"
Mhm.
Like, well, because our friend
Grandmaster
Grandmaster
said.
apparently works for Lucas. If you go back to the Discord, this is one of those things I had to take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, too much of his stuff had checked out. So oh, I knew I should have charged that. But
So like,
yeah, my blue light. Well, it doesn't. Grandmaster says Ahsoka season 2 was slated to be the final season, currently in post production. Pickup start tomorrow for the next few weeks. Who knows what changes phony baloney will make? Yes, Grandmaster not being a fan of baloney. All right, let me try to decipher this from Iron Boy Wonder. Some of these messages get a little. Believe haters sequel era trilogy wouldn't view Cinema Starfighter. So yes, there. This is where the damage comes in, because a lot of these guys that were turned off by the sequel trilogy. This is why I actually think that you're not seeing a lot of people coming out for The Mandalorian and Grogu. There's also some other reasons, but if you look at it from Lucasfilm's perspective, and I can riff on this for a little bit. If you look at it from Lucasfilm's perspective, it makes sense actually why they chose The Mandalorian and Grogu. A lot of people, you know, uh, kind of wondered, I guess, about why that was the case. But if you think about it, The Mandalorian still is probably the most successful of the Disney Plus shows. And it was definitely
hmm
the most widely received and was the most heavily marketed. Now, part of the problem is you have a twofold thing. And actually those pitch meeting videos that they do on YouTube, which I absolutely love those because there's so much truth in it. And they did one on The Mandalorian and Grogu. And one of the things that they pointed out was like, wait, the Mandalorian Grogu, it's like, but everybody knows him as Baby Yoda. Like all the marketing, like it was all this whole like Baby Yoda thing. And so not too many people, unless you were actually watching the series, clued in on what his actual name was. So there's a
hmm
little bit there. But the other problem is that often when you try to adapt something that starts out in television and go to a film or vice versa, you don't always get the same audience. It's kind of funny because they actually have blurred the lines quite a bit between the theatrical release and streaming or just like what we used to call home video, right? I mean, there used to be a difference because obviously you used to have the 4:3 aspect ratio. You had a lot less resolution on standard television. So it used to be that there was a stigma. If you were an actor and you went into television, you were like a television actor, right? You weren't taken seriously by the film industry. Well, back in the 2000s, it started and then they started actually blurring the lines, and now there really isn't much of a difference. I mean, everything that you see on television now is just essentially like little movies or whatever. But the problem is that the audiences don't always translate. Just like when you jump mediums like video game, when you adapt a video game into a movie, you would think that if it's some, really big selling video game, that you would get all the people that play the game to go see the movie, but that's not always the case. And so I think in a lot of ways, when they were choosing their next project, it's understandable why they did The Mandalorian and Grogu, because it would have had some of the like a built-in audience for it. Now, I want to get your opinion on this because I actually think it might not have been a bad idea to start with Starfighter or Rogue Squadron, like more like the Top Gun in space.
I think I think it goes either or. I mean, because it's all um, for the most part non lore related. Whether you go with Mandalorian Grogu, whether you go with Starfighter, whether you do a World Squadron, I think they're kind of like their own independent. It's almost kind of like visions or whatever. And I hate to say it like that, but it's almost kind of like Visions where you have a concept and you're like, okay, what if we did a Western in space? What if we did a Top Gun in space? What if we
Yeah, you're talking
did
about like genre
this
type stuff.
genre? Yeah, exactly. Whereas, like I said, that as I was saying before, the identity of Star Wars is the Jedi versus the Sith. It's no different than when you look at Harry Potter. What is Harry Potter? It's it's Hogwarts. You got Slytherin. You got Hufflepuff. You got Gryffindor. I mean, you have those houses, and that's what makes Harry Potter.
Well, here
Without that,
we
it's
could
kind of
we could go one step further because we always had to bring a Star Trek reference in,
oh,
right?
yeah.
And
There we go.
honestly, I think a lot of what they're trying to do with Star Trek is the same problem that they're trying to do with Star Wars. But that's to a larger degree. Like they're really going off track on Star Trek. I mean, they're like all the agenda based stuff, all the, just trying to shake things up and make this different stuff. It's the same thing though. They're getting away from what Gene Roddenberry originally created. And they're getting
Mhm.
away from a lot of the stories, a lot of the timelessness, a lot of different just elements that made Star Trek what it was and made it so popular. And that I think too is a good parallel for Star Wars is that they're getting away from it. Now, oddly enough, I remember you were talking about, people dressing up and everything else and
Yeah.
like there hasn't been like a character, you pointed out Kylo Ren, but I mean, to me, it's like the one good thing. The closest they have come to coming up with a compelling character, honestly, is Kamir. Like that's the closest, even though it came out of an atrocious project.
Hmm.
But the character itself, though, if you remove Kamir from the acolyte and you basically put him in something and you put him in something good, I think that that's probably the closest that they have come. But
Well, yeah,
again,
I would say Kamir and Kylo are kind of like in the same ballpark in a way. The only
yeah,
thing
kind of
is, the difference is that Kylo is actually related to the main characters we all know and love,
right.
as opposed to Kamir. We don't believe that he's related to anybody like that. He's just kind of his own person, which is fine. But all I'm saying is that until Star Wars gets or Lucasfilm can get back to telling, finding some good characters that, aren't, you know, over the top and, super powered too soon. You don't have a bunch of agenda. You are actually telling a timeless story and you actually have characters that actually, because if you don't have a good villain, like people want to see the red blade, people want to see the red lightsaber. And it's like, okay, well, the last ones that we really saw who really held it down were Vader, Palpatine, and Maul. Kylo, yeah, not really. All right, but not really. The lightsaber duels that we got in the sequel trilogy were lackluster. So what I'm saying is, and then now don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, he showed his power. Like they made him powerful, like when he was holding that blaster bolt and or being able to pry into people's minds. Okay, sure, like that's showing some stuff, right? And the fact that he was so unhinged and he was just kind of psychotic in a way. Okay, that was a good take. But what I'm saying is like when we were talking about Ahsoka season 2, and we know that the big bad is Thrawn. We know he doesn't have any force abilities. And I'm not saying that everybody has, but it's again, it's Star Wars. It's kind of like you have to have the villains that actually match the hero. And and it's something that has to be established. Like now with Superman, of course, you got this guy who's an alien from Krypton who has all these powers, but then you got somebody like Lex Luthor who's like this mastermind. Okay, that's a little bit different. But when you start talking about like the other superhero franchises, you start looking at Batman, you start looking at the Avengers, you start looking at those. I mean, they're fighting super powered people, and they are like, okay, these guys are, oh, Thanos is coming, or Galactus is coming, or I looked into the future and I saw this is, it's like, okay, this is what it's the comic books jumped off the page, and unfortunately for Star Wars, much like Star Trek, like you said earlier, it comes from the mind of one person. Gene Roddenberry for Star Trek, George Lucas for Star Wars. So there wasn't there's no other source material, in the sense of, like, it's not like we have like hundreds of, years of comic books that we can search through and start pulling out a bunch of stuff. Like, granted, there are a bunch of great books there, like you mentioned earlier. There are a bunch of great books that were
And
released
there's
that
30
you can pull
years of
stories.
books.
Yeah,
30
that's what I'm saying.
years
Like,
is a lot,
you
man.
got some nice. Yeah, you do. But see, then now you have to start looking at, like, okay, well, again, a lot of those books are made revolve around Luke Skywalker or his family, and it's like, okay, well, you don't have that because it hasn't been established. So, like, now you have to try to, like, if you want to tell those stories, you have to, again, you still got to create characters to fit into that story to make it work, is all I'm saying. And it's like, until Star Wars figures out, or until Lucasfilm figures out how to do that, I think they're going to be stymied, because there's only so much Mandalorian and Grogu, Starfighter, Rogue One you're going to be able to do before Star Wars fans are going to be like, the heck with it.
Well, so there's a couple of things there. Number one, there is the one compelling villain left, and you named him, Thrawn. Thrawn, and of course, that did not come from the mind of Lucas. That actually came from the mind of Timothy
Sure.
Zahn. And the
Right.
thing is, there are a lot of these guys, a lot of these authors, like Timothy Zahn, like Claudia Gray, like all these people who have come up with compelling villains, both Force users and non-Force users. That's not the issue. And then you go to Lucas. Look, when you read Lucas's treatment for episodes 7, 8, and 9, okay, there were some cool elements to it. Make Maul the bad guy and bring in Darth Talon as his apprentice and all that. But then he goes like insane with this whole like little microscopic force things or something. It's like, even if Lucas came back, people would probably hate it. I mean, it wasn't like it was, again, Lucas, it's a hit and miss thing. The good things about him is he's a master storyteller. So even if you didn't like the story he was telling, he's going to tell it masterfully. The second thing is, though, that he's not doing this for profit. And this is something that I had brought up a long time ago, and I bring it up on
Right.
multiple shows, actually. That is that Disney's biggest issue when they brought Lucasfilm was they were trying to replicate the effect of why Star Wars is so popular without actually replicating what made it popular. They were focused more on the outcome, not on the cause. It's kind of like, okay, we want to make these blockbuster crazy movies and all that stuff. Well, for a while, they were able to live off of the reputation of what preceded it. I mean, if it even had the Star Wars name on it, it was guaranteed to make a ton of money. And they were able to ride that. But eventually, you start letting the audience down enough, and you're not going to have that. And so that part's true. But I would argue they already have all the elements in place. First of all, they already brought Thrawn in. So he's canon now. He's already in. They tweaked him a little bit from the expanded universe, but he's still essentially the same character. And he's completely compelling. In fact, when Thrawn was introduced in 1991, and even through now, if you look at not just all the Thrawn books, and there were many of them that were in the expanded universe, it just isn't the original 3. I mean, there's at least 5 or 6 books that feature Thrawn that are independent stories. And there's a lot of stuff that has no Force things, no Sith, no Jedi. It's compelling. Why? And it still feels like Star Wars. Because you had authors that actually understood what Star Wars is. They understood the essence of it, and they understood what actually makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Well, I
And
agree with that.
you know, it
I
just
I totally agree with that. The problem with that is though, is that transferring things from one medium to the next, like you said earlier, like a video game to the film, like a Mortal Kombat or something like that, right?
right.
Well, the problem is great books. Don't disagree with you there. They even introduced Thrawn, I think, in a good way in Rebels.
Hmm.
But the problem is, how many people saw Rebels? Like you said, you're going to get a different fan base in the theaters or on a Disney Plus show. So when you introduce Thrawn into um, live action, and there's no, he comes out of the ether. Well, okay, well, who's the Smurf blue dude? Who's the Avatar looking guy?
But you could
Who's
have
that
said that
guy?
about the Emperor too. I mean, they talked about the Emperor in episode 4, and you see him a little bit in episode 5, but he basically comes out of the ether in episode 6. We don't know all the backstory behind it. In 1983, we didn't know. But if you tell it right, you don't need to. You don't need to have a backstory
But
for
it wasn't
every
told
single
right. That's my
character.
point, though. It wasn't told right
Well,
in Ahsoka. In live action, a Thrawn was not
right.
introduced. Like there's
So you're right.
nothing
They
that talks about he's a
Yes.
chiss, he's smart, he has all these skills. None of that is talked about at all. He just shows up. At least in the prequel, I mean not the prequel, the original trilogy. Okay, at least you got um, Yoda at least trying to give you some. Hey, look, don't. Hey, this guy is not who the average
Right. There
Joe.
are clues. I mean, there's
There are
there's like
clues,
there's some
and the
clues as to
and the
who this
fact that
guy is.
he's holding Vader's leash. I mean, if you see how powerful Vader is, and then there's a guy who's above him, it's like, well, who's that guy? It's going
Okay,
to
so the
make you
problem
wonder.
here's the problem with the way they introduced Thrawn then. They do assume that you had watched Rebels before you watch
Exactly.
this stuff. But this goes back to what I'm saying. See, I don't have a problem with that, and I'll tell you why. I'm tired of Star Wars being made for the casual fan. You know?
I
Now,
get that.
now I know
I
what you're going to
understand
say
that.
though, because and this is true. If you want to expand the audience, you do kind of have to you do have to have things that will bring in. But again, and this is where I think what we're both saying is the fact that if they tell the stories correctly, you could do both. You can make Star Wars for the hardcores. You could bring all these characters. Case in point, Thrawn. Okay? You bring Thrawn in, all of us hardcores are like jumping for joy, right? But
Hmm.
if you for those who don't know who Thrawn is, it's like if you give a little bit of, if you tell the story correctly and give some of the information, it's like a guy that's like never seen Rebels, understands what they're watching. Okay, now the casual fan is all into them. And that's the
Yeah,
thing.
because even in Ahsoka, it's like, okay, you know, Sabine is all like, okay, we gotta find Ezra. We gotta find. Well, who's Ezra? If like, is he some Jewish kid? Like, I don't know. Like, who the heck is Ezra?
Rabbi Ezra.
Like, exactly. It's just like, okay, why do we need to go find Ezra? Why is he important to the story? And especially when half the time we're seeing Sabine, she's the main character for
Yeah.
most of the
Yeah.
show,
I mean,
and then you bring
actually,
Ahsoka.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, what are we doing here?
See,
Like,
that's the first problem. The first problem is the show's called Ahsoka, and yet Sabine is who we're mainly focused on for like the first third of the series. Again,
that
the problem with
that and that.
Ahsoka, there's a lot, but I mean, it was poorly written and executed in many respects. And that's the other problem too, is like you're saying, is the fact that the disjointed storytelling actually hurt it in a lot of ways too. And then of course violations in logic. 'Cause I remember, you know,
Hmm.
I remember us tearing apart. I don't remember every little detail about it, but I remember that one scene, the whole like for the Empire or whatever.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
and I mean, we just shredded that because there were so many things. Again, we had to
so
go
many
back and
things.
watch it. There were so many things in that episode that made no logical in-universe sense. Like
Hmm.
in universe, the logic was just completely trashed. And I just remember us just shredding that. And with good reason, because again, that's the type of people we are. Look, I mean, you do something amazing, we're right there with you. You know, we're not Star Wars apologists. You do something that's stupid, we're going to point it out. You know, I mean, I
Hmm.
get it that, sometimes people, you get these type of fans, and I'm not talking about the shills that are all over YouTube, because those guys are being paid. Those guys are essentially being paid to be like, everything's good, you know.
Yep,
But
exactly.
but the thing is that you also get these fans who get really emotional. And again, it's like,
Hmm.
listen, I've been there since 1977. There's a lot of fans that I've gotten in debates with. And the first thing I'm like, okay, dude, when did you get into Star Wars? Oh, like 1997 or something. I'm like, well, then shut up. I was
Hey,
into this thing like 20 years before you
20
were.
years, 20 years.
Yeah, if anybody was going to be emotional about it, it would be the 6-year-old me that's been in this thing from the beginning. And even
Right.
I'm not like that. So it's like,
Hmm.
you know, but again, I mean, I just think that a lot of times you do have to point these things out. You can't just let everything go. Now, let me get to these. Dragonfly has chatted in 3 things, and I want to
Okay.
bring these into our discussion. So he says, I personally didn't mind or don't mind the cherry picking. Some of it worked, some hasn't. I think they're trying to treat Mando and Grogu like a classic pulp space adventure serial, which is absolutely true.
Yeah, I
That was
agree.
a good thing about it, actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
true, true.
Bit of deep cut. Zahn was given copies of West End games, D6,
TT RPG
score
as
guides.
lore guides.
Okay, well, that's good. That's actually good. Daryl, you're right. His background is given in the new novels, and Rebels assumes you read that novel, which is true. Iron Boy Wonder says, one hated, not like prequel. A lot of people are 30, 40, 50, 60. And that's my other point right there, is the
What?
fact that, well, what Iron Boy is trying to point out here is the fact that you have people from multiple generations now. And this is something
Yeah.
that I've brought up, you've brought up, we both brought it up at different times in different shows. And that is,
Hmm.
it was easy when it was a linear thing, right? Star Wars comes out in 1977. You have a group of people that see it. Okay, then the next batch comes out. Okay, by the time the prequels come out, you might have like a couple of generations, right?
Hmm.
And of course, they had re-released the special edition versions in 1997, so it's sort of like everybody's still kind of on the same page.
Hmm.
But you do have the age discrepancy there, because now the 7-year-old kids that were like, they're like 7 years old, 10 years old, or whatever in 1999. They all love Jar Jar. Where all of us who are in our late 20s, not not so much. And so now you're starting to see that generational difference, which has
Yeah.
only grown exponentially. And so I think that that's something that's worth mentioning. All right, we got Grandmaster and we got Voyager. So Grandmaster says, Tim wrote Thrawn's character with precognitive abilities. Okay, so, but still. Voyager says, the thing I'm most looking forward to is that hopefully Hayden has a larger role. Absolutely. Absolutely. And she says, I hope they change up Ahsoka's personality. You mean to where
Yeah, she
she's not
unfolds
just
her arm.
crossing her arms like every five
Right, she
minutes and just
unfolds her arms.
being very stoic? And I mean, look, I don't want to go back to Sky Guy and R2E, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need her to be very cold and clinical either. I mean, okay, granted, I know she's been through some stuff, the Jedi let her down or whatever, but you know,
Yeah, they're trying to make her seem, wise and and
yeah,
it's
but
it's just it's yeah, but you can still be that without with personality. I mean, like
yeah,
Obi-Wan still was wise and had personality. Yoda had personality. I mean, they're trying to make her almost like how Mace was.
yeah, exactly. Grandmaster says Tim was consulted on how to bring Thrawn into Ahsoka. And then Iron Boy says, not a lot of people like Phantom Menace. Or, well, I don't know about that. 20s. But yeah, well, that's it, right? The way that the original films were written versus the way the prequels were written. The problem is that Lucas started getting really into the whole digital thing because it was brand new. And you did have an issue, right? I mean, you had like one actor in this like warehouse of giant green screens or blue screens. And it's like, okay, act now.
Act.
Because you know,
Right.
Lucas is notorious for being a horrible director for acting. And you know, these guys, like, this is brand new. Like, nobody really knows how to do this yet. So that's why you get these Oscar-nominated actors with
Like
suddenly,
Liam Neeson.
yeah, Natalie Portman and all that, and they all have, like, you know, this wooden dialogue. Ewan McGregor, like, he was amazing in Trainspotting, and it's like, I mean, he was probably one of the best things about the prequels, honestly. And you did have some issues there, right? But and it's true. It's like the way that the prequels were written versus the way that the original trilogy. Iron Boy's right. There is a difference there, and there is going to be a generational appeal there. It sounds like you're taking a leak over there.
Definitely not.
It's like, hey man,
Sorry.
I gotta go.
Sorry, guys. I'm not using the refresher. I promise.
That would have been awesome, though. I mean, granted, I'm not encouraging it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying. Iron Boy says even Natalie Portman vocally disapproved the green and blue screen. Well, and she had never, you know, she was coming from some more like almost independent type, like Where the Heart Is, The Professional. You know, she's like all of her stuff were kind of these like very grounded, earthy, you know, almost independent-ish type films. Which technically Star Wars is an independent film since Lucas basically finances it. But yes, now all of a sudden you're doing that. And then she got into it, you know, and then she started getting into the Marvel thing and she loved that. And she's been trying to get back into Star Wars. I mean, she really wants to come back to it, which surprises me, especially now. But it just shows that, you know, people look back now on some of this stuff and they're like, you know, maybe it wasn't so bad. You know, I don't necessarily mind this, but I mean, I definitely think that yes, there are some changes that they need to make, not just in the characterization, not just in the way that they either introduce new characters or pretty much frame the characters that we're familiar with. But I think they also have to really sharpen the writing, you know, get the execution under control. Because what was that one? There's that one scene where Ezra and Sabine, I think, were on that like horse or carriage or something. Like they were traveling across that planet, and both of us, I remember, our criticism was like, I mean, it just looks and sounds like these guys are reading lines off of cue cards.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, it just
No emotion, especially like when they met each other. Like Ahsoka, I mean not Ahsoka. Sabine was making this whole big deal. We gotta get Ezra. We gotta go find Ezra. She finds Ezra, and it's just kind of like, hey, good to see you. You too. Like that's it. Like that's the emotion you give. Like we spent half the season trying to find you and get to you, and this is what you give us as far as like when you meet someone that you've been looking for like ever. It was just,
yeah.
terrible.
Well, and that's
Now, Rory McCann, who's replacing Ray Stevenson as Baylan Skoll, like, see, those, again, Baylan was a very compelling character. See, again, you can create kind of some compelling characters because you don't quite know what his deal is. But, and even his little hitchwoman,
yeah, Shin Hati. I thought she was.
Shin Hati.
I thought she was great too. Actually,
Yeah, she's like
two,
Harley Quinn of like the,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And I thought that those
the Star
two,
Wars universe.
they were the best things about that show.
Absolutely,
hands down.
So, and you have to be able to delve into and can't be afraid to just go deep in, like, okay, what's their deal? What's up with them? See, that's how. And see, to me, I think that's what you need to do. Instead of having all these filler episodes where it's a bunch of stupid stuff. Like, oh, we're chasing this little mouse around and we're trying to get this little thing, or we're Chopper's doing some weird. Like, we don't care. You know what? Give us character development. Give us a good side story with Shin and Baylan, and let us find out more nuances about them. Start seeing like, oh, okay, this is why they feel what they feel. This is why she's so unhinged. This is why he's so calm. He used to be a Jedi, but then these are his views. He's more like a Dooku versus, a true Sith Lord. That's why his lightsaber isn't completely crimson red. Like, give us that stuff. And then when you want to send us back to the main story plot, okay, do that. But now when we come back, we have a wider picture of what's going on versus, you're putting these little stupid, goofy little, oh, look at Chopper running around and he's yeah, it's cute and funny, but it's like, okay, we only have 8 episodes and you just wasted one watching Chopper run around. Who cares?
Yeah, I know. There's really so much that there are so many issues with the first season of Ahsoka. That even to do a recap on it would probably be a show in and of itself. And you have to basically get away from some of this stuff because again, they're forgetting, and this is why Lucas's attitude of like, I'm making these for me, I don't care what anybody else thinks, like, fine. That's where that comes in handy because he did have a little bit of instinct about knowing stuff like that. Like, he knew, okay, I could throw in this little comedic element or whatever. Okay, sure. He did some stuff with Jar Jar where you're kind of like, okay, we don't need this. So I'll never forget when they came out with that. Some fan like recut the Phantom Menace without all the Jar Jar scenes, and everybody loved it.
Yeah. Right.
And they're like, this is what it should have been. And again, you basically have this dichotomy of Star Wars is technically intended for kids. When it came out, well, the problem is as the kids got older, because you gave us such a rich, wonderful world full of just really compelling stories that have been and can be told. As you go into adulthood, it's like, okay, well, now I want a more adult version of this. I don't necessarily need the kid stuff. On the other hand, one of the things that made the original trilogy so special was it was a perfect balance. It was sophisticated enough, because that's one of the things that Lucas said when, he said it was made for kids, and people were like, well, where's all the goofiness or whatever? He's like, look, kids are more sophisticated. They can pick up on things that a lot of people don't realize. And he did that. And he did that where there was just enough balance of some of the comedic things, but it wasn't over the top, and I think
dumb it down.
Right. And I mean, it was a perfect balance of that. And I think that that's the problem when you have something like that. You look at Ahsoka, even down to the whole where they had, I forgot what song they used, but it was almost like when they did the whole Beastie Boys sabotage thing in Star Trek. It was almost like they copied that, where Sabine hops on her little speed bike or whatever, and they're jamming that. Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing?
This
now
music doesn't even belong in Star Wars.
Yeah, this doesn't even belong in Star Wars, and you're basically ripping off like a Star Trek, like a newer Star Trek thing. It's just so, it's like, how derivative are you going to be? All right, let me get these chats in. Dragonfly says, anticlimactic a bit, no argument there. Grandmaster says, Kamir's character is debatable. His introduction and then what he actually is to become in the future is puzzling. He is to become the originator of the Knights of Ren. Huge letdown, similar to Finn. I can actually get on board with that assessment. And then Ted says, Ewoks, anyone?
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, even then, it's contained. Now, I will give Lucas credit for this. So the Phantom Menace is littered with Jar Jar, but if you notice, like each subsequent film, Jar Jar had a lot less to say, to the point that by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, you just see him. Like, he doesn't even have any lines. So, I mean, that part's cool. As far as, like, what Grandmaster's saying about Kamir, I mean, I think the idea was And I remember reading this about the Leslie Headland interview too. They were going to delve more into his whole relationship. In other words, basically what they kept threatening the Acolyte was supposed to be is what we were going to get in season 2. It was going to focus on Khmer and Plagueis. You're going to see a little bit of that whole like Sith thing. And, you know, whether or not he was the originator of the Knights of Ren, I'm not 100% sure. I do remember the comic book that showed the guy that led the Knights of Ren before Kylo did. I don't know if maybe, you know, Khmer was like the first guy, and then, you know, who knows. And I do know that Filoni, I read somewhere that he was actually talking to Manny about possibly reprising that role in other projects, which I would be on board for, because I did enjoy that character quite a bit. And I would not mind seeing Khmer show up in something that's actually good and worthy of that character. Voyager chimes in and says, why couldn't Khmer and Plagueis have been the plot of season 1? Well, that's exactly. That would have been what we were promised.
That makes too much sense, Voyager.
Yes. That's the problem.
That's why. It makes too much sense.
That's the problem. Okay, now, Grandmaster actually puts us back on track with a question that we often ask, but he's playing co-host now and says, what are you both expecting from Ahsoka season 2? Are you looking forward to the father, son, and daughter thing? Before we answer that, let me just get this thing in from Dragonfly real quick. He says, I don't agree. Mando and Grogu shows us a lot of new music in Star Wars. Music was really good. To be fair, Ahsoka has Kevin Kiner as their composer, not the great Ludwig Göransson like Mando. Well, I was more talking about dropping in something like your Beastie Boys kind of thing, you know, in that. I'm not talking about actually, one of the things that I will say is that, and I think you actually agree with this, is that I've actually been now, The Mandalorian and Grogu actually had amazing music. I thought that was like stellar. Like, I thought that was a step above just about everything. But I will say this, in the absence of John Williams, I actually haven't had any issues with the music in any of these Star Wars projects. Like, that to me has been fine. Now, I mean, you know, there's various degrees, right? I mean, it doesn't mean I love everything. Like, there's certain things that I think I like better than others. But I mean, for the most part, I haven't been bothered by the music at all. I was talking about them ripping off the J.J. Abrams Star Trek stuff by putting some, I forgot what song they ended up using, but it was something along the lines of DC Boys Sabotage, like what they did in Star Trek. That's the thing that I'm like, okay, guys, even though you could do that because, again, you had some industrial type music in The Mandalorian and Grogu, but see, it fits. That's the thing that everybody forgets, is that you don't just have like this random stuff. There has to be something behind it. There has to be some purpose to it, something that drives the story. You know, it fits because of the context of the scene. Not, I'm just going to do this just because, you know, I'm trying to show this rebellious whatever. It's jarring. And that's the issue that I think both of us had. And Dragonfly says, I see, and you come from a music background, that's high praise. Yeah, well, I mean, and that is. I mean, look, the music, again, I mean, it's either been like, I've been okay with it. Like, I've never not liked the music in a lot of these projects. And I remember you and I, whenever we would review any of these shows, we always would talk about how, yeah, you know what? The music actually was pretty good in this.
Yeah.
I'll even go a step further. I think in some cases, the music is actually better in the Disney Plus shows than it was in the sequel trilogy.
True.
All right, let's get back to Grandmaster's thing, because it's basically a really good wrap-up type of question. It's like, what are we expecting from season 2, and are we looking forward to the father, son, daughter thing, Mortis stuff?
I'm looking forward to it if they do it right.
Well,
that's always my thing. I mean, I hate that fact that I have to say it like that all the time, but I do. It's just like I'm looking forward to it if they do it right. I think Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, if they that's kind of their mission or whatnot. That's what it seems like. Then okay, cool. My expectations. Um, I really want to know, like, okay, what went on with Ezra while he was gone, and then I really want to see the development of Sabine seemingly becoming a Force user, Jedi, whatever the case may be, and how Ahsoka tends to overcome her handicap, so to speak. Like she's deficient in in her M count, it seems. So, okay, um, how do you, if that's the case, how do you circumvent that and still get a better result out of Sabine? Uh, I mean, I think Huang is going to just be Huang. It's going to be funny. So I think that's going to be interesting. But I really just want to see, um, and I really want to see, honestly, I really want to see Thrawn just be just super cerebral and just like cunning. I really want to see him just really be in his bag and just like, man, this guy's good. It's almost like no matter where I turn, it's this guy's always like seems to be like two steps ahead of us, and he's
Right.
always got that. Like that's what I want to see Thrawn be Thrawn. No different than like how we always said, like, man, we always knew Vader was powerful, but we always wanted to see Vader really just kind of be powerful. But it wasn't until Rogue One we started to see that, and then in the Kenobi series when he's walking through that town and he's just snapping people's necks and throwing people against the wall and dragging like, okay, yeah, that's Vader. That's the Vader that I've always imagined in my head. That's yeah, okay, that's that guy. Even when he had was it third sister or fifth sister or whatever her name, Moses Ingram. And he's like, you were warned, and he like just picked her up and had her like suspended in the air, like just stuff like that. It's like, yes, that's the Vader
Dude,
that we
Obi-Wan
wanted to.
probably had some of the best Vader material of anything.
Oh yeah,
Add
absolutely.
to that
But
that
then
they actually had James Earl Jones's 1977 voice through AI. It was like
yeah,
perfect. I mean, it was
oh
much
perfect.
better than hearing the
Then
93-year-old one croak through a bunch of lines in Rogue One. It's
true,
like it was nice
very
that
true.
that's the use of AI that I 100%. It's kind of like, okay, if you
Yeah, if
can
you're gonna
use it,
use it,
if you're going to use it in the de-aging, but especially use it in the voice because what's really cool about that is they could start if they wanted to do some of the expanded universe stuff or whatever. They could totally just do that in animation and just
mm,
use AI to give everybody. Let's get Harrison Ford's 1981 voice or whatever, and everybody, you could do all that, and then you could just
yeah,
go infinitely with it. You don't have to go through
yeah.
the expense of actually creating AI versions of the actors. Although, I would. I'm one of the people that it would be okay. I mean, obviously you got to do it ethically and have the permission. But I mean, when you're dealing with a lot of these long-time franchises, you're gonna have actors age out of it. And I personally would much rather see AI than recasting. But again, and we did do that show about that. But I think it's probably going to be time, maybe at some point this year, to actually
Circle back to
revisit
it.
that. Yeah, to revisit that discussion. The whole, should we start to rely on AI for carrying some of the franchise, especially if you want to start telling some of these stories that people are still interested in. Like, hey, let's look at what happened between Empire and Return of the Jedi. At first people are kind of like, well, I don't really know if I, need to see like every little thing, but then when they come out with this stuff in the comic books, you're kind of like, oh crap, this is actually a really good story. Well, why should it be limited to comics? But I will go and echo a lot of your sentiments. I'm really looking forward to, and I'm expecting. Again, he basically said what he's expecting, not looking forward to. But I mean, they're probably one of the same. I want to see more of the Baylan and Shin dynamic. I want to see more of that. I want to see how it relates to father, son, daughter. I think that was an underutilized thing, is the fact that they introduced these characters and they actually had, like you had said, they sacrificed telling that part of the story for some of these other either little cute scenes, or maybe they spent too long on some other stuff. You're kind of like, hey, don't need this. You have that. Focus on that.
Who cares about the space whales?
Right. Exactly. It's kind of like, look, you guys,
Or whatever.
you have some stuff. You got some stuff going that would actually be pretty cool. So I'd like to see more of that. I want to see more of the Thrawn thing, because obviously, if you look at what they were featuring, there was a whole component, and this ties into what you were talking about with the whole Ezra thing too. There was definitely a component of Thrawn's grand plan that we really didn't touch on, like the stuff that's in the crates. And I mean, there was just like a lot of things that I think that they're planning on expanding in season 2. So I'm looking forward to that. Of course, he's making his way toward the core worlds. And I think that there's a lot that they can explore there. And I really hope that they do that. Like you, I hope that they explore a little bit more of the Sabine thing, but I also hope that it doesn't just become this whole like Sabine training to be a Jedi thing when you have all this other stuff that we really haven't seen that would be a little bit more compelling. But again, I'm not going to nitpick too much as long as they handle it correctly. That's really all I care about. All right, let me get some of these last chats. Grandmaster says he's talking to Voyager. The last episode of Acolyte was written and filmed 2 weeks before the finale. Leslie added Plagueis and Yoda to spike the viewership numbers to get a season 2, which backfired on every level. It often does. Dragonfly says, I'm looking forward to Ezra and Thrawn clashing, philosophically, mentally, and physically. That's a good point. Grandmaster agrees with you, says both of these characters were show and scene stealers. And then, of course, he says, I disagree in wanting more. Less is more. That's why it works. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, Yngwie Malmsteen, the famous guitar player, basically, he always says, I get tired of people saying less is more. More is more. By definition. And I think that it really depends. Yes, I would agree that, you don't have to just blow out everything and make something a grand spectacle. Sometimes, like for instance, I'll give you a really good example of the whole less is more thing is the way they handled the Emperor in the original trilogy.
Right.
First in episode 4, he's only mentioned. But you get a sense of who this guy is just by the characters that you do know, like Vader and Tarkin. The way they talk about the Emperor, you're kind of like, well, dude, these guys are like, like these guys seem to be the ultimate thing in the power in this thing. Who's this Emperor guy if these guys are afraid of that guy, right? So that's a really good example of a less is more thing. But I also think when you're talking about something like, say, the space battle in, in any of the space battles, well, in that case, I don't think that less is more. I think more is more. I think you do want to see the spectacle. I think you do want to throw everything out there and make it epic. So I think really it just depends on what you're talking about ultimately versus, what you're going to have, right? He says there are specific reasons why certain scenes, Chopper running around, are prioritized more than others. Probably to justify the budget and, creating these things. Says, I agree 100%. Balance is key. Good versus evil, tones, action, story. Absolutely. Ted says that there's one thing I learned from Star Trek that I can apply to Star Wars. It is, you gotta love the space whales. Hey, that's true. In Star Trek 4, technically they were space whales after they got into space. So, you can do that, right? Voyager says, they need to make Thrawn smarter. This 4-year between the first and second season better be worth it. Well, I mean, I concur there. And that was the other thing too, is that we both noted that even though it was voiced by the same guy, you basically had a more, I would say, accurate version of Thrawn in Rebels than you did in Ahsoka Season 1.
Absolutely.
And I do hope that we get more of what we saw in Rebels for Thrawn in Ahsoka Season 2. I think that that's important. So, all right. Well, I think that's pretty much it, huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a good topic, actually. And look, we had a bunch of people watching today. We had a bunch of people chatting in. Always makes for a good show. So hopefully, you know.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. You know, and again, I mean, should you guys feel the need, if you want to join our membership program, we've already had some, you can go to buymeacoffee.com. You can either make a quick donation or you can actually join one of these programs and, you know, you get some stuff for that. Dragonfly is getting his t-shirt as we speak because he had recently signed up, so should be there like within the next week or so. So that'll be good. Yeah, I think that ultimately this is a good topic. I'm looking forward to exploring more topics like this. Grandmaster just quickly says, hey, keep this in mind, everyone. Thrawn's 68 years old during Ahsoka Season 1. Yeah, but it's not really his age that we're talking about here. We're just talking about his characterization. Iron Boy Wonder, boy, ciphering some of his stuff. Yeah, I'm going to have to let that one go. Ted says next week needs to be Jar Jar versus Ewoks versus Porgs. You know what? Hey, I'll tell you what. You know what? You sign up. No, first of all, that's good. But if you sign up for one of those programs and you donate to us monthly, you know you do get to pick the show topic. That's one of the things that you get in one of those things. Which means if you actually said that, we would have to do it. But that's actually kind of almost like a fun topic to do.
Very whimsical.
It would probably get the most views too. That's what's so funny.
It'd be right up there with like what Filoni thinks about Star Wars.
Oh yeah, or like the nature of the Force or some of those other ones that we do. Yeah, right. And like out of nowhere, we just get like 3,000 views on something, and that's not even me promoting it either. That's like, it's like real organic views. Yep. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Next week, I'm sure we'll have something good. And hey, something look at us. We were actually on, okay, we were 5 minutes late, but still, we were on Sunday at 8. Again, hit the like button if you guys like this video. Of course, the algorithm likes that. Hit the subscribe button, and if you do subscribe to the channel, please hit that notification bell, because again, a lot of times our schedules get a little mixed up. And unfortunately, we're not yet at the point where we could do this full time, guys. Share these videos, tell everybody, go to the site. You'll see in the link in the description, you can actually buy the t-shirts, mugs, mouse pads, hoodies. Like, we got all kinds of head-to-head merchandise now. So that helps support the channel, and you guys sharing our videos and just telling people about it helps support the channel. Build a bigger community out of this. So that would really help tremendously. But again, hit that notification bell so you guys know exactly when we're going live. All right, I think that's going to do it for tonight. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.